So let's take the horizontal menu that we just built and take it a step farther and add the drop-down choices. This is going to be done completely with CSS, so we're not going to be using any sort of JavaScript, which is traditionally the way you would create a drop-down menu. This is the exact same file that we worked on in the part 1 portion of this exercise, so we're just going to build upon it. To basically mark up a drop-down menu, we need to nest a complete list within a list item of the horizontal menu that we already have. The nested list is going to become the contents of the lists items drop-down menu. So let's go ahead and let's create that right now. I'm going to come into my page and I'm going to change the markup for the XHTML, and I'm going to go ahead and just do this with you. I'm just going to create a drop-down menu that's going to come under my location button right here, and I'm just going to list some different locations. The key to making this work successfully is that, first of all, you'll notice that none of my UL or LI items are going to have any classes or IDs. The only thing that's going to basically differentiate this list from a regular list is the list container up here, the div that contains the list, which is going to allow me to target the appropriate CSS rules to the various list items. I'm going to go ahead and I need to make sure that I put the entire nested list from UL, opening UL to closing UL, inside of a list item. So that means that I can't have it follow this list item. I need to make sure it appears inside of this list item. So notice how I'm pushing down the closing LI for this location markup. We'll go ahead and we'll add a opening UL, and let's just go ahead and add our closing UL here, and then within this we'll go ahead and we'll create our new list items, and I'm just going to go ahead and we'll type north, and let's just go ahead and make these dummy links right now too, so this is all ready for us to go. I'm just going to copy this and we'll just paste this a couple times, and we'll just keep this simple and have the locations be north, south, east, and west. Alright, so I have a UL that opens, I have the list items, I have a closing UL, and notice how this is contained within the opening and closing LI tag of the item that I want this to fall from. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's save the page and we'll refresh this, and you can see that it definitely throws off my whole navigation, and that's because I haven't styled for any of this yet. So that's what we're going to be working on here. Let's go ahead and let's begin right there. I need to make some styles that are specifically for the drop-down menu to get it to stack under the parent element, because this is not how I want it to work at all. So we don't have to use classes or IDs for the submenu. We can just target it. We can go ahead and target it by writing a style that's going to affect a list within a list. So that's what we're going to be using right now. We're going to go ahead and target a UL element that is contained within an LI element of a parent list. And that's exactly what we set up for right here. So let's come back up here into our style sheet and let's begin by doing this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to come right in here on my style sheet and we'll start writing our new styles. So I always am going to preface my styles with the nav container, and we're going to go ahead and target a UL, LI, UL. So an unordered list, a list item, and then another unordered list. And it's going to specifically look for something that is going to meet this criteria, which is going to be my nested list. We'll go ahead and we'll set the margin for this to 0. And I'm going to go ahead and set the width for this to, let's just try using 8 ems. That should be sufficient to hold the information right here. So the margin is set to prevent the UL from inheriting any other margin settings that might have been specified. And this is just, the width is just going to go ahead and set the width of the menu in combo with the LI's 100% width, it's going to go ahead and make the menu stack. So let me just show you. If I go ahead and reload my page, you can see how it begins to stack it. Now this obviously isn't looking the way we want it to yet, so let's go ahead and let's make another style, and I'll just actually copy at least the beginning part of this style right here. My next rule that I want to specify is going to be for nav container ul li ul li. So a list, this is going to hit the nested list item. So a list item that's inside of an unordered list, that's inside of a list that's inside of an unordered list. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and make the list items fill the list containing the list container of the UL. So let's go ahead and set the width here, and this will be easier for you to visualize once you actually see what it's doing on our page. So if I reload my page now, you can see how they're stacking nicely underneath our location, which is the parent unordered list right here. Okay, so it definitely is coming close to what we want. Obviously it needs some better styling, and it doesn't close automatically, but we'll set these things. So by setting the width of the UL of the nested list, and then forcing the LI elements within it to be 100% of that width, that's what's going to actually allow them to stack. Without the 100% width on the LI, then these may be on the same line, and we just saw that happening previously, especially short words would actually push this to the same line. So that's not what we want. So now that the next step that we want to achieve here is to get the drop downs correctly positioned with respect to the menu. So the way to do this is to set the child element's position property to absolute and the parent's position property to relative. So we're going to go ahead and do that next. I'm going to come back into my code right here, and my right here I'm going to go ahead and set a position property on my nav container li. So let's go ahead and position this to be relative. And just setting this by itself, if I refresh my page, doesn't really do anything. But when I come back here, so what I've done here by setting this relative is I'm positioning context for the absolutely positioned drop down, which I'm going to create next. I'm going to come into my ul li ul rule that we already made, and we'll go ahead and we'll create a position of absolute. And what this is going to do is it's going to position the drop down ul in relation to its relatively positioned li parent. So when I reload this, you can see how the wrapper around nav container now disappears. So this is certainly looking more along the lines of what we want. Let's go ahead and add styling to the top and the bottom of the list so we have our border, and that's going to display appropriately. The border is going to be attached to my rule that I specified for my ul li ul li. So we'll come in and we'll go ahead and add that. I'm going to go ahead and style the three sides of my drop down items. So we'll go ahead and hit border left, and I want those to be solid 1 pixel, and I'm going to use my color, my same blue color right there, and then I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, and we'll go ahead and specify that basically we want the same thing for the border bottom and for the border right. So if we save now and refresh, you can see that I get a nice border that appears around each of those drop down list items. So that's looking much better. I would like to have a little border on top of the first drop down item, north, so we can use the same thing that we used before and target the first child. Let me just copy this rule, and we'll come down here, and we're going to go ahead and make a new style for the nav container ul li ul li colon first child. So remember how we used that in the last exercise. The first child of this nested list item is now going to take on the properties that we need it to. And we want to use a border top. And we're going to go ahead and specify that it be solid, 1 pixel, and have a hex value of our liking. So if I save and refresh in the browser, you'll now see that I get a line above my north drop down. So this is really coming together quite nicely. It's looking much better now. If you'll notice slightly, if you look at this corner of my drop down right here, it's hard for me to show you when I'm mousing over, but it actually is 1 pixel off, and that's because it aligns with the list item, not with the list item's border. The border is on the outside of the list item. So, and that's because of the positioning context is now set to the parent element. Its position is set to absolute, and the parent is set to relative. So to fix this, if it's something that, is going to bug you, and if you're particular about how your design looks, that definitely might affect you. It's just a matter of nudging it 1 pixel into the correct location. And we can go ahead and do that by assigning a declaration to our UL, LI, UL, and all I have to do is go ahead and set the left position to -1 pixel. So if I save that and we refresh, now watch when I refresh, it's just going to nudge that over 1 pixel. So now it aligns perfectly right here, and I don't have that 1 pixel, misalignment. It aligns perfectly. So this is looking really great. Our horizontal menu is going to, here it's displaying properly. When I roll over, I get the effect that I want. Everything's lined up the way that I want. So now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to hide the drop-down menu when it's not being hovered over. It's because it shouldn't actually display until you mouse over the location button that we've created, or the location link that we've created. So we're going to go ahead and we can go into our code right here, and we can set our nav container UL, LI, UL's display to none. And I'm gonna go ahead and save this, and if I reload, you can see how that completely disappears. Now what I'd like it to do is I'd like it to basically come back and drop down when locations is hovered over. So display is inherited. So all the list items within the UL are going to disappear when the drop down is hidden. What I want to do next is I want to make it appear when the drop-down's menu choice is hovered over. And I can do that by creating a style, a list hover style. So let's go ahead and let's just put that here. I'm going to go ahead and specify nav container. I'm going to go ahead and make this rule on the UL, LI's hover. So that means my first parent list item right there. And we want to affect the UL. So nav container UL, LI, hover, space UL. The selector is going to state that the drop-down UL should display when its parent LI is hovered over. So let's go ahead and do that by changing our display value to bblock. When I mouse over, there it is, it shows up. So that is great. It's looking just like what we want to have happen. The menu is going to be displayed when you hover over either the menu or the drop down, and it basically just springs to life when you get there, and then it disappears when you're not on it. So this is really exciting that we can go ahead and create this without using any sort of JavaScript. We do need to go ahead, and we should probably, even though this is working fine in Firefox, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add 1 line of code just to ensure that this is going to work in some of the other browsers. So let's just add another. I actually want to use my same display block right here. So I'm just going to put a comma, and I'm going to use nav container spelled right. And I'm going to do ul li ul colon hover as well. And that's just to ensure that if you're in a specific browser that wants to have you be on the unordered list as opposed to the list item, and you know what, I'm sorry, I did not spell that right. That should be a UL right there. It should be a ULLIUL. I believe that's what I said, and then I went ahead and wrote it incorrectly. So my apologies there. But basically, if they're on top of the unordered list item UL, if they're hovering there, it'll display as block, or if they're on the unordered list item and hovering, it's going to go ahead and display as block. So basically, we save our page, we have a lovely drop-down menu, and I think that you'll agree that this is a really useful technique. You just have to make sure that you abide to the rules that we talked about. This menu is going to work in all of the latest generation browsers, but as I mentioned before, it will have problems in IE6. There are some workarounds for that, but we'll talk about that in a later lecture.